On Wednesday, the U.S. is set to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign imports, which will likely be met with retaliatory tariffs in response. The White House is calling it Liberation Day, but some experts fear this move will only make inflation worse. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley has more.
The White House says these tariffs will spur domestic production, but some economists say they're not so sure. The White House says Wednesday is Liberation Day, as new global tariffs are set to take effect, which the administration believes will liberate America from dependence on foreign goods.
Whatever they charge us, we charge them, but we're being nicer than they were.
But some economists fear those tariffs could hit the middle and working classes the hardest, even as the White House says it will make the country more prosperous.
Every economist of every stripe will tell you is going to, in fact, raise the price of goods for Americans.
The tariffs include a 25% duty on all foreign cars, which some critics say will drive up prices, hurting the middle class.
The worst part is nobody knows what these tariffs will look like, perhaps not even Donald Trump.
The White House says the president will unveil specifics Wednesday.
He's doing what's best for Main Street. It's going to be very exciting.
Already the stock markets are shaky, with investors uneasy about what's to come. Democratic Senator Cory Booker railing on the tariffs during an all-night speech against the administration.
This drives the cost of goods up, and the consumer is the one who ends up paying the increase.
But the president says the tariffs are needed because he claims other countries are ripping off the United States.
We help everybody, and they don't help us.
The president's expected to address this issue with more specifics on Wednesday. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Trevor Shirley, thank you. Now, joining me to discuss the Trump tariffs and much more, Brett Samuels, White House reporter here at The Hill. Brett, so Trump says tomorrow is Liberation Day. The White House says it's going to be very exciting. I don't know if you're going to be that excited if you own stocks on Wall Street, but there is lots of anticipation for this announcement. There are reciprocal tariffs, but there's a lot of uncertainty over exactly what Trump means by this. The thinking that's being reported is that it's somewhere in the realm of 20% tariffs on most imports. What are you watching for tomorrow?
Yeah, certainly, Drew. I think, first of all, you'll be watching for, as you said, the specifics of what exactly are these reciprocal tariffs. Trump has teased that they'll be more lenient or more conservative than people are expecting. 20% tariff would still be pretty significant, slapping those on all imports from all these different countries. So we'll be watching for what the specifics are, but also watching for how other countries respond. Already you're seeing the European Union signal they're ready to respond. You're seeing some Asian countries signal that they may band together to respond in some way. So certainly that will be at the top of the list of things to look out for.
The stocks have been extremely volatile in the days leading up to this announcement. They were way down earlier this morning, back about even last I checked. This comes on the heels of the first quarter of this year was the worst on Wall Street in 3 years. The European Union is vowing to retaliate against these reciprocal tariffs. The Trump trade wars have some Republican senators feeling a bit nervous. They're threatening to vote with Democrats on this resolution today that would try to rein in some of Trump's power to impose tariffs. What do you make of the willingness of Republicans to say that they're considering siding with Democrats?
Yeah, it's interesting because, in theory, a lot of these tariffs, or traditionally tariffs, are sort of they need to be approved by Congress. They need to sort of sign off on them. Trump is using, executive powers here under national security reasons to impose these tariffs. But I think the fact that Republicans are even considering sort of breaking with Trump on this and sort of publicly signaling their opposition with these votes shows that a lot of Republicans know that the sort of ripple effects, the trickle-down effects of these tariffs could affect their states, could affect manufacturing in their states, jobs in their states. So I think it just kind of further proves that despite the White House's defiant tone, even some Republicans know that this is very risky economic policy.
Yeah, and some very different Republican lawmakers that are saying they're going to vote with the Democrats on this one. You have Susan Collins, moderate from Maine. You have Rand Paul, conservative from Kentucky. Tom Tillis, swing state Republican, North Carolina. Yeah, I'm wondering if Trump's approach to the economy is going to end up hurting him in the polling. There's this new Harvard Caps Harris poll. It says 40% of registered voters approve of the president's performance so far. It's down 3 points from last month, within the margin of error, so it's not clear if these numbers are actually saying anything. But if you look at several different issues, approval rating on the economy has ticked down a bit. they're bad poll numbers, but they're actually higher than what Biden had when he was leaving office. I wonder, this doesn't represent a cratering of support for the president, and I wonder if that will only cause him to push forward with his agenda.
Yeah, certainly. I think you have a couple things at play here. One, as you said, still higher than Biden. Two, Trump obviously not eligible to run for re-election. So sort of the political calculus is maybe not weighing on him, or so the Constitution says.
Sure.
He might say differently, but the political calculations may not weigh quite as heavily on him in that respect. So that is certainly a factor. And then I think you have the fact that Trump, he has this business background. He's always been uber confident about his stewardship of the economy. A lot of voters give him credit because of that business background. So that may give him a bit of a cushion there as well.
I want to talk about Cory Booker, Democratic senator from New Jersey. He's been doing this marathon speech on the Senate floor, using this privilege afforded to senators to basically hold the floor and prevent other business from happening. Let's take a look to what Booker said this morning.
I started this talk 13 hours ago by talking about getting into good trouble. This is not normal. These are not normal times. We must begin to do as John Lewis says, get in good trouble, get in necessary trouble.
Booker went all night, was continuing today. I saw at least past noon today. I'm not sure if he's still going right now, but he's been railing against President Trump, Congressional Republicans, Elon Musk. Do you think this is what the Democratic base says when it says, we want you to fight harder?
Yeah, I think it's certainly maybe one method that we're seeing of Democratic lawmakers responding to that call. Obviously, Cory Booker's move to hold the floor here for nearly 24 hours is certainly getting attention here in Washington. It's maybe annoying some Republicans in particular who feel like this is just a messaging exercise. But that's sort of the point, is it's capturing attention, it's getting some headlines, it's something different that Democrats are trying. So I think this is a sign that Democrats are trying sort of a different strategy to maybe gain some traction.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune wants to get his budget proposal on the Senate floor this week. The path forward, though, has landmines everywhere, including in the form of the Senate parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is going to rule on this accounting tactic that Republicans want to use to gauge the price tag of their budget resolution. What exactly is the parliamentarian considering, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so certainly this is sort of at the crux of, I think, what Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House are kind of fighting over. Is there are Republicans in the House obviously who are very concerned about cutting spending over the long term. So this Senate parliamentarian ruling that would determine essentially long term what the price tag of this bill would be, how much it would add to the deficit potentially, is going to be important because Senate Republicans are trying to sell the idea that their bill is the one to go with. House Republicans are going to say our bill is the one to go with, and they could use this parliamentarian ruling essentially to lobby their case one way or another. So as you said, this is a very fraught process, a lot of landmines that Republicans are trying to navigate here, and this parliamentarian ruling could tip the scales one way or another.
There's also this notion that House and Senate spending levels might not line up. It seems like they're going through great pains to not say how much they want to cut and not say how much they're going to run up the deficit. Is this going to come to a head at some point where the rubber is going to hit the road?
It's a good question. I think it depends how much Republicans at the end of the day actually care about sort of the bottom line, the nitty-gritty details of how much things might add to the deficit, or how much money specifically is being cut. For example, the House resolution that initially passed called for this House committee to find X amount of spending to cut, and it never said Medicaid, but the implication was that the cuts would have to be made for Medicaid. So I think similar to what we saw with this first tax bill, Republicans were saying don't worry about the deficit because the tax bill will add enough to the economy that it won't matter. I think we might see a similar tactic here where they're going to say this will all work out in the wash, and they're less concerned with the specifics.
We touched on this a bit earlier, but President Trump says he's not joking about serving a third term. He was asked about it on Sunday. He says, basically, lots of people want me to do this. Lindsay, Republican senator, one-time Trump critic, now a close friend of the president, says, ask me in 27. The Constitution, as you said, is pretty clear, but I wonder if this ends up becoming another purity test for Republicans, to be able to display their affection and commitment to President Trump.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. It's one of those cases of the old adage of take him seriously, not literally. I guess that's what we're all trying to figure out here with this third term stuff. But I think, you look back at 2020 when Trump lost the election, and then for weeks after the fact, he was, making these claims of fraud, of widespread fraud, claiming that was the reason he lost, even though there was no evidence. Republicans were sort of, didn't exactly want to, nip that in the bud, and they just kind of let it linger. And then, here we are, however many years later, he's still saying the 2020 election was rigged. We could be in for a similar situation here, where no Republican really wants to just put the kibosh on it and say Trump can't run for a third term. He's just joking. But then it persists for a few years, and we'll see where we end up if nobody's willing to sort of, nip it in the bud.
Strikes me that could also have the impact of keeping potential 2028 Republican candidates from putting their names out there if Trump leaves this dangling.
Absolutely.
But we will leave it at that. Brett Samuels, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.
Harvard University is under intense scrutiny as the Trump administration threatens to cut nearly $9 billion in federal funding, accusing the school of failing to address anti-Semitism on campus. News Nation's Tom Dempsey has the latest on the administration's attempt to crack down and deport students in the country on visas who it accuses of supporting terrorism.
School leaders at Harvard have raised some big concerns about these threatened cuts by the federal government, which launched this review as part of the Joint Task Force to combat anti-Semitism. Multiple federal agencies will be taking part in this, looking into if Harvard is in compliance with regulations and helping to prevent anti-Semitic harassment. The task force says it will review around $9 billion in contracts and grants with the school. Harvard President Alan Garber warned that the loss of those contracts and grants would, quote, halt life-saving research and imperil important scientific research and innovation. And in a statement on the other side of this, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon wrote, Harvard's failure to protect students on campus from anti-Semitic discrimination, all while promoting divisive ideologies over free inquiry, has put its reputation in serious jeopardy. This all comes as the federal government has until this evening to respond to the complaint from attorneys for 30-year-old Tufts University doctoral student Rameza Ozturk, who's behind bars at an ICE detention facility in Louisiana this morning. Video of masked ICE agents detaining Ozturk last week in Boston quickly went viral, with the Department of Homeland Security accusing her, without evidence, of engaging in activities in support of Hamas. Ozturk has previously voiced support for Palestine, and a year ago she wrote an opinion piece in the school paper calling on Tufts not to do business with companies with direct or indirect ties to Israel. Her attorneys say her detention violates her First Amendment and due process rights. The Trump administration, though, has vowed to crack down on students in the country on student visas who allegedly show support for Hamas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently estimated the number of student visas the government has taken away.
Maybe more. Might be more than 300 at this point. We do it every day. Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa.
You're saying it could be more than 300
sure,
visas?
I hope. At some point, I hope we run out because we've gotten rid of all of them. But we're looking every day for these lunatics that are tearing things up.
A judge is also still weighing where to hold court hearings for 30-year-old Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil, who remains behind bars in Louisiana. His case has gotten international attention, with Khalil's attorneys saying the government improperly targeted him for his political views. The federal government, though, accuses Khalil of lying on his green card application and failing to mention previous work with the Syria office of the British Embassy in Lebanon, as well as for a UN agency for Palestinian refugees. The federal government argues that Khalil's case should be heard in Louisiana, where he remains detained. And if that happens, any appeals would be heard by one of the most conservative appeals courts in the country. We also know a doctoral student from Iran who attended the University of Alabama got detained last week by ICE agents. The exact charges against him still remain unknown. At the Capitol, I'm Tom Dempsey, News Nation.
News Nation's Tom Dempsey. Thank you. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.